You know that feeling when you fall head over heels for someone, that feeling we write songs about, make movies about, pretty much build our entire lives around? Well, what if I told you that for most of human history, that exact feeling wasn't a goal, it was a diagnosis? Yeah, a dangerous, irrational sickness that people thought could absolutely ruin your life.
It's a pretty wild contrast, right? Today, we see finding the one as the ultimate life goal, but back then, it was seen as a type of madness. So the big question is, how did we get from there to here? How did love transform so completely? Welcome to the Vernacular Vault. Today, we are digging deep into the incredible and kind of weird history of romantic love. All right, so let's start our journey way back, over 2,000 years ago in classical Greece. In their world, that intense, all-consuming passion we call falling in love, that wasn't something you chose. Nope, it was seen as something the gods did to you, a literal madness sent from on high. But here's the twist, and it's a big one. This madness wasn't necessarily a bad thing. For a super smart guy like Plato, the passion of Eros wasn't some personal flaw. He saw it as this powerful, divine force, a kind of frenzy that, if you could just handle it the right way, was actually a gift. And this is the crucial part. We're not talking about clinical insanity here. This divine madness was more like an intense motivation, an inspiration that was supposed to rocket you toward a higher purpose, like philosophical enlightenment or understanding true beauty. It had almost nothing to do with settling down, getting a mortgage, and starting a family. Okay, now let's jump forward a few centuries, and the whole idea shifts again. By the time we get to the Middle Ages, love is no longer a divine madness. Instead, it's turned into this super sophisticated, really elaborate game played almost exclusively by the rich and powerful. Welcome to the era of courtly love. And you can just see from this, it was incredibly structured. This wasn't about some spontaneous, messy feeling. It was a procedure. It was a rule book from that first glance to worshiping her from afar, getting rejected, trying again, all the way to the end. It was like a quest in a video game with very specific levels you had to unlock to prove you were worthy. And the rules of this game, they are going to sound completely bonkers to us today. I mean, look at this. Courtly love was almost always adulterous. It existed completely outside of marriage, which was just a practical economic deal back then. In fact, one of the official rules was that being married was no real excuse for not loving someone else. It was all about this secret, noble passion that had nothing to do with your actual home life. You know, if you're finding this history of our own hearts as fascinating as I am, do me a favor and hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell so you don't miss our next deep dive. So we've gone from a divine sickness to an elite, aristocratic game. But how do we get to our modern idea of love being the actual foundation of marriage? Well, the answer, believe it or not, has way less to do with poetry and a lot more to do with money. So, check this out. Between 1500 and 1800, especially in places like England, people started doing a lot better financially. For the first time ever, a whole bunch of people had enough stability that they could actually think long-term about their lives, instead of just, surviving until next week. And that opened up the door for brand new ways of living, strategies based not just on survival, but on personal happiness. Now, when researchers started digging through the books and plays from this time, they found two really distinct types of love popping up in the stories. First, you've got passionate love. That's all the fireworks, the desire, the high drama. But then, this new idea started to really take root. Tender love, which is all about emotional connection, companionship, and just quiet affection. And this is where the data gets really cool. A huge study of English plays from this era found that as the economy got better, the language around that fiery, passionate love stayed pretty much the same. But the language of tender love, words about affection, companionship, being partners, it absolutely exploded on stage. Culture was actively changing what love even meant. And this is the part that just blows my mind. This cultural shift in the stories people were watching wasn't just reflecting what was happening in real life, it was shaping it. The data showed that the rise of this tender love in plays actually came about 6 years before a real-world increase in marriage rates. The stories people were telling themselves were literally changing how they built their lives. So let's just recap this wild ride we've been on. We've tracked the idea of love from a sickness sent by the gods in ancient Greece to a secret, illicit game for the nobility. And finally, thanks to a changing economy, into the companionate, tender foundation of modern life that we all know and cherish today. So it turns out our deepest, most personal emotion isn't some timeless, universal thing. It was profoundly shaped by the economic realities of the 18th century. Which leaves us with one last, pretty big question to think about. What forces, economic, technological, social, are shaping our definition of love right here, right now?